Right, so first of all, good morning, BSP in second year, and ganun din sa mga FM ng Pamantasang Lungsod ng Valenzuela. Welcome sa Philippine Popular Culture for this week. We'll talk about approaches, no? Kumusta naman yung inyong paghahanap doon sa mga pinapahanap ko last week? Nakahanap ba kayo ng mga babasahin? Kamusta? BSP? Yung section dito nga kayo? Nakakalimutan ko. BSP 22. Kamusta naman yung inyong dito, paghahanap? May nahanap ba kayo? Hello? Dinig niyo ba ako? May nahanap naman kayo. Okay. So, that's good. Kasama talaga yan sa online learning. Yung kayo yung maghahanap. So, again, to the BSP and the FM, yung pinagawa ko sa inyo will be your midterm requirement. So, huwag na kayo ma-expect ng exam. So, yun na yun. Yung output yun na yun. Yung pinahanap ko sa inyo, yung mga neo-Aristotelian and feminism, visual and media-centered. Medyo nahirapan. May mga na-receive ako na parang messages. They are getting difficulties in finding the visual and the media centered, no? Kayo namang grupo yon. Well, kung nakahanap kayo ng material, congrats. Meron talagang material noon. Actually, medyo hindi siya yung katulad ng iba na mag-google lang kayo, makikita nyo siya agad. Hindi ganoon, no? Yung visual and media centered are more of talagang yung content niya is babasahin mo ng maigi for you to understand, to get the meaning. Nonetheless, I'll be checking your output. So dun ko makikita yung inyong yung success nyo sa paghahanap ng ibig sabihin at pag-a-apply niyo nung perspectives na to, ng mga ito para sa Philippine popular culture. Okay, so moving on, now we go to the lesson for this week. So this is the Philippine pop culture approaches in popular culture. So yun yung lesson natin for this week. Yan, nababasa nyo ba ng maigi? Guys? Alright, very good. So, apat itong approaches na gagamitin natin. So, kung sa perspective or lenses, when in looking doon sa mga popular culture, now the approaches are somewhat lenses din, but more on the approach nga, kumbaga, hindi siya perspective, hindi siya yung paglalagay sa sarili mo no, sa isang bagay, kundi pamamaraan in order for us to understand more on the popular culture. It is very essential para sa final part ng ating lesson o ng ating subject, since you'll be studying more about the popular culture of the Philippines, no? And then understanding the media and media and other channels ng popular culture sa Pilipinas, and paano to naapektuhan tayo or meron ba to talagang epekto sa atin. So the first approach is the Defamiliarization by Bertolt Brecht. So let's go with the definition. So defamiliarization or Ostranini is the artistic technique of forcing the audience to see common things in an unfamiliar or strange way in order to enhance perception of the familiar, a central concept in 20th century art and theory, ranging over movements including Dada, postmodernism, epic theater, and science fiction, is also used as a tactic by recent movements such as culture jamming. So it is retrieved from the Bertolt Brecht research.blogspot.com. So yun yung okay. So ano na, namnamin natin yung defamiliarization. So defamiliarization daw is the artistic technique of forcing the audience to see common things in an unfamiliar or strange way in order to enhance perception of the familiar. No? Sa madaling salita, there are things na might be unfamiliar to us o kaya ay new sa paningin natin, no? Bago sa paningin natin. It is very common dun sa mga postmodernism, of course the epic theater, if common to sa mga napapanood, no, yung defamiliarization. And sometimes because of the newness o yung pagiging bago sa paningin natin ng mga bagay-bagay, it is hard for us to understand it, no? It is hard to perceive dun sa paningin natin. Parang ang hirap nating tingnan, parang ang hirap unawain o nakikita natin, no, dahil bago sa paningin natin or hindi tayo familiar dun sa bagay na yun. And defamiliarization by Bertolt Brecht is more of paglalagay, no? This thing, this new thing or this unfamiliar thing is just a variation of something familiar to you, no? Hindi siya bago. Yun yung sinasabi ng defamiliarization. Hindi bago yung bagay na ito. You just it is just a variation, it's just a version ng bagay na nakita mo na. You're just taking for granted it, no? Hindi mo lang siya masyadong pinansin. Hindi mo lang ganong pinagtutuunan ng pansin. That's why it became unfamiliar to you or it looks like new to you. Pero the fact is, nakita mo na to, no? You're just taking for granted yung bagay na to, di ba? Parang ano yan, parang defamiliarization is if you see the pop, the K-pop or the J-pop or the P-pop na meron tayo sa Pilipinas. Kung titignan mo ng maigi, yung K-pop, meron naman sila, bagaman may mga dumarating na mga bagong group, no, ng Korean group or kahit sa J-pop, no, bagaman may mga dumarating na mga bagong groups, no, and introducing us new dance moves or music, di ba? The fact is, this is not new, no, it is just a variation, it is just a version of something familiar, already familiar to you. Nakita mo na to, no? Kasi kung hindi mo na to nakita, you not get interested doon sa bagay na yun kasi sobrang bago. Alam niyo yun? Para ka nakita ng sobrang bagong bagay, so wala kang pakialam. Pero because this is just a version of something that is familiar to you and you are already hooked doon sa bagay na yun. Diba? Ikaw ay K-pop fan. Diba? K-pop fan ka ng mga nauna pang mga K-pop groups. Diba? And you see something, a new group, 'di ba? Kaya ka na hook sa kanila because you are already hooked doon sa mga mas nauna pa. So yun yung sabi ng defamiliarization, no? Na artistic technique of you are forcing the audience to see common things doon sa bagay na akala nila bago o unfamiliar. So defamiliarization of what? Of that which is or has become familiar or taken for granted, hence automatically perceived, is the basic function of all devices. And with defamiliarization come both the slowing down and the increased difficulty of the process of reading and comprehending and an awareness of the artistic procedures causing them. Ayan. So, sa madaling salita, di ba? Familiar or taken for granted. Hence automatically perceived is the basic function of all devices. Yung all devices na pinag-uusapan natin dito, medyo nagahang yung aking teka lang ha. Okay. Nawala yung ano ko. Nawala yung camera ko. Alright. So, let me continue. Yung sinasabi ko, no? Aha. Turn off camera. Aha. Settings. Alright. Check. Alright. So, saan na tayo? Defamiliarization of what which is or has become familiar or taken for granted, hence automatically perceived, is the basic function of all devices. So, yung all devices na pinag-uusapan natin dito is applicable doon sa mga popular culture, no? Lahat daw ng popular culture, no, yung napapanood natin, nakikita natin, kultura na ginagamit natin, or ang basic function niya is to hook yung mga bagay na familiar sa atin na tinitaken for granted lang natin, no? It is important na yung popular culture ay somewhat familiar or using things that are taken for granted for us, kasi hindi niya makukuha yung audience, hindi ito magiging popular doon sa audience kung hindi familiar yung audience dun sa bagay na yon, no? Yun yung sinasabi diyan. Ang point is that the popular culture is familiar, is becoming popular because of the audience is already familiar to that, no, and just taken for granted it, no. So there's no such thing as a new or unfamiliar, no. It is just a version of what is usual sa atin, what is familiar, or we experience it such that hindi natin siya ganong binagbibigyan ng pansin. Okay? So in more recent times, it has been associated with the poet and playwright Bertolt Brecht, whose Verfremdung yung alienation effect. German kasi kung mas mabigkas. So was a potent element of his approach to the theater. Brecht in turn has been highly influential for artists and filmmakers including Luc Godard and Yvonne Rainer. So last part, the distance effect, the distancing effect o yung Vermeer kanina is more commonly known by John Willett's 1964 translation, the alienation effect, or as the estrangement effect. It's a performing arts concept coined by playwright Bertolt Brecht, which prevents the audience from losing itself passively and completely in the character created by the actor, and which consequently leads the audience to be consciously critical observer. So, in this approach, yung searching of the familiar, yung familiarity nung new or unfamiliar culture sa atin daw prevents the audience from losing itself passively. Have you experienced it, no? Nanunood ka ng, ay nako, there's something wrong, nagkakagulo yung ano ko. Check. Yeah. Alright, so nagkakaproblema yung aking video. Hindi sila nag-uusap ng maigi. Ayan. Okay, nakita nyo na. Okay, so balik tayo sa pinag-uusapan natin, no? Have you experienced when you are watching something, no? And then while watching it, you become passive, completely losing yourself. Ibig sabihin, nag-enjoy ka dun sa pinapanood mo. And then, sa sobrang enjoy mo na pinapanood mo, na-appreciate mo yung character, no? Na-appreciate mo yung character. Pero there are also times na you are become, sabi nga, ang point dito ng defamiliarization is to put the audience to be critically observer, no? Critically observer na hindi lang niya basta pinapanood yung isang karakter, kundi nilalagay niya yung sarili niya doon sa karakter na yon and become critical observer doon sa nangyayari doon sa character. So let me give you an example. I guess familiar kayo rito, no? Yan. So this is the remark of Sultan Kudarat. No? Have you watched this video, no, from Kapuso Mo Jessica Soho? Ayan, the KMJS, 'di ba? While watching the video, or kahit hindi ding episode ng KMJS, you're just watching a snippets of the video, 'di ba? While watching it, 'di ba? Yung sinasabi natin, ang gusto mangyari ng defamiliarization is prevents the audience from losing itself passively and completely in the character created by the actor, and which consequently leads the audience to be consciously critical observer. Diba? Nung una, on the first part, nung iyong panunood, no, you realize or recognize yung difficulties o yung challenges doon sa buhay ng bata, 'di ba? Ni Raymark, isa siyang 10 taon, and then siya ay nag-aararo ng isang malaking lupa, tutulungan niya yung kanyang lolo in order to help his family, 'di ba? But to the point na umabot ka ba doon sa point na this is not new. This is not unfamiliar to us, no? Na-realize mo na nangyayari talaga 'to eh, 'di ba? And at that point, no, while you realize that this story is not familiar, okay, is not unfamiliar rather, and not new, 'di ba? You become critical observer. You ask questions. 'Di ba? Asan yung parents nito? Asan yung ganito, yung ganyan, no? This kid needs help, 'di ba? Yung mga ganong concept. We become more critical doon sa character, and then we're not just watching the character itself, 'di ba? Hindi natin basta pinapanood na okay, this is Raymark, okay, nag-aararo siya, okay, meron siyang kabayo, and then so kasi pag ganung point, you're just passive audience, observing lang yung pinapanood mo, but you go to the point that you ask questions, you become critical observer doon sa punto de vista, no, o point of view nitong bata, 'di ba? Na this thing is unfamiliar, this ain't new, no? This ain't unfamiliar. It happens, no? Nangyayari 'yan. Okay, check. Ayan. Okay, so ayan, na-record na siya. Ngayon lang na-record. Okay, so again, we go with the semiotics. I wish is na-encounter nyo na to during your senior high school and during your media information literacy, no? Kung di nyo na-encounter to, napakamalas nyo naman. Sisihin nyo yung inyong teacher during that time. Okay, so Semiotics by Charles Sanders Peirce. Simple lang to. Semiotics is an investigation into how meaning is created and how meaning is communicated. No, its origins lie in the academic study of how signs and symbols or visuals and linguistics created or create meanings. It is a way of seeing the world and of understanding how the landscape and culture in which we live has a massive impact in all of us unconsciously. No? Our actions and thoughts, what we do automatically, are often governed by a complex set of cultural messages and conventions and dependent upon our ability to interpret them instinctively and instantly. For instance, when we see the different colors of traffic lights, we automatically know how to react to them. We know this without even thinking about it, but this is a sign which has been established by cultural conventions over a long period of time in which we learn as children. It requires a deal of unconscious cultural knowledge to understand its meaning. Viewing and interpreting or decoding this science enables us to navigate a landscape of our streets and society. So, technically, the semiotics is simple. It is about the signs and the symbols. And the signs and symbols could be everything or anything, no? Pwedeng kahit ano yan, such that under the decoding process or the interpreting or giving interpretations on these signs and symbols depends on the audience or the receiver, no? Sometimes yung mga there are body movements, there are cultural signs that we are familiar with. For example, the thumbs up, diba? The thumbs up is a cultural sign. Ibig sabihin, bawat isa sa atin alam natin yung ibig sabihin yan, diba? Pagka okay ka lang ba, okay ka lang, ganun ka, o kaya ganun, ayan. So sa madaling salita, in terms of approaches, the semiotic by Charles Sanders Peirce is very important. It's such that in culture, no, in popular culture, yung mga nakikita natin sa telebisyon o sa social media, mga popular na kultura nga, no, they are signs, and sometimes continuous exposure to these signs give us a hint, and this hint became our source of interpretation, no, our basis of our interpretation. Sometimes there are signs and symbols that are very personal, no? For example, kung ikaw ay may jowa, ikaw ay may boyfriend, may girlfriend, there are some signs and symbols na kayo lang nagkakaintindihan, 'di ba? Tingin-tingin lang nagkakaintindihan kayo, 'di ba? Do you still remember the time before COVID, 'di ba? Nung face-to-face classes pa, 'di ba? Si crush, 'di ba? May senyasan kayo, 'di ba? Nagsisenyasan kayo ng crush mo. 'Di ba? So those are signs, and sometimes kayo lang nagkakaintindihan noon, no? And we have to understand the context. Yung tinatawag na context. Kaya kayo nagkakaintindihan dalawa because you understand both yung context. Sa ibang tao, they cannot understand yung signs na ibinibigay mo doon sa isa mong kausap, yung observer, pwede nilang hindi maintindihan yung sinasabi mo because they don't know the context. So, dito na papasok yung kahalagahan ng context in the semiotics, because yung signs and symbols pwedeng magbago yung kanyang meaning based doon sa context, and the context will be depend doon sa individuals na nag-uusap o sabihin natin nagpapalitan ng signs and symbols. There are signs and symbols that are universal. Tulad ng sasabi ko sa inyo, like the traffic signs, this is universal. Alam mo na kapag kapula is you have to stop, kapag green you have to go, 'di ba? And yellow is to ready, 'di ba? But the context, the idea here is the context. We need to understand the context. Yung red doesn't always mean stop, 'di ba? The green doesn't always mean go. Kapag ka ikaw ba ay nakita, halimbawa nasa kalsada ka, nakita ka ng isang tao nakapula, i-stop ka ba? 'Di ba? Or kapag nakita ka na naka-yellow o naka-green, mag-go ka ba? 'Di ba? Kasi damit yung nakikita mo, hindi stoplight. So, ibig sabihin, depende pa rin sa context. Ayan. So, ibig sabihin, we have to understand the context first para ma-decode natin ng maigi, ng mas maayos yung signs and the symbols. Yun yung sinasabi ng semiotics. So, for example, everyone is a semiotician because everyone is constantly, unconsciously interpreting the meaning of signs around them, from traffic lights to color flags, the shapes of cars, the architecture of buildings, and the designs of cereal packaging. The signs don't only need to be visual, they can be oral or sonic signs too, such as the sound of a police siren, usually heard before the vehicle is seen. Yan. We know, for instance, that the following signs in the West means everything is okay. Yung thumbs up, diba? Is okay. This can be dated back to its alleged use by Roman emperors to sign whether a gladiator would live, hence be okay, and its reverse, thumbs down, signified death. But in scuba diving, this sign means go up to the surface by the side of the and then if you're by the side of the road, ibig sabihin hitchhiking ka, if nagaganyan ka sa side sa gilid ng daan, so gusto mo hitch a ride. So again, the context are very important. In other words, we need to understand the context in which a sign is communicated in order to comprehend its real meaning and hence act appropriately. What is going on around the sign is usually as important for us to know as the sign itself in order to interpret its meaning. So, ang pinopoint lang natin in this approach ng semiotics is that hindi lahat ng nakikita natin sa telebisyon, sa social media, sa dyaryo o whatever media it is, no, na nag-i-start ng popular culture, yun yung ibig sabihin niya. We have to understand the context, no, para mas maintindihan din natin yung ibig sabihin. Okay? So, now, I have here a video. Hindi ko alam kung maririnig nyo to, no? Again, give the link doon sa ating I'll give the link doon sa video para makita nyo. So, this is a science by Kwentong Jollibee. So, hindi ko alam kung maririnig nyo yan. Anyway, let's move on to the next part para maintindihan nyo. Or basta ang point dito ng science is that titignan mo na maigi, they are talking about science and futuristic science na parang ito siya na nga kapag ginawa niya tong mga bagay na ito. But rather at the end of the advertisement, yung isa palang guy are doing the science, doing the context, no, talking or giving para mag-create ng meaning doon sa mga signs na hinahanap ng babae. So again, in semiotics, it's about the signs and the symbols. There is a context in order for us to understand more or efficiently understand what is the true meaning of the signs and the symbols, because the signs and the symbols are very prone sa pagkakamali or misinterpretation. Okay? Hindi porket binigyan ka ng bulaklak, binigyan ka ng chocolate, nililigawan ka na, di ba? Hindi ganoon. O kaya hindi porket lagi mo siyang kausap, katawagan mo siya hanggang 3 AM ng umaga, mahal ka na niya. Baka ano lang 'yon, baka alam niyo nun. Is you'll be just part of the jar of hearts. Okay, so moving on. Natin yan, baka maiyak pa kayo. Okay, and let's go to the third part, which is the form, content, and context. Now, this is similar with the signs and symbols, but this is more on the artistic side and more on the arts elements, no? So when we talk about form, the form of a work of art or design refers to all of its visible elements and the particular way these come together as a whole. So this include the material or medium, the color, the use of line, the texture of surface, the composition, the scale or dimension, the duration of a work. This is common dun sa mga popular culture like the album covers and even the yung composition ng isang artist, no? When we say Bella, yung sabi ko sa inyo, Bella Porch, 'di ba? Tama ba ko to? Kabigkas. Ano yung composition, yung kanyang composition niya, 'di ba? The lines na nasa katawan niya, 'di ba? The images na pinapakita niya is part of the form, no? And somewhat it affects us as the audience, 'di ba? It creates something in our head, nag-iisip tayo, and those can be part or reason why we like her or we don't like her. 'Di ba? It's a material, it's the medium, the color, the use of line, 'di ba? And when we see albums, 'di ba, yung mga digital albums na meron tayo, there are composition, textures, surfaces, 'di ba? Color, scale and dimension. Yan, those are form. Yung pag-uusapan natin dito, yung forma, yung meron, yung physical characteristic ng isang tao, ng isang karakter na sa popular culture. Lahat 'yon, we observe that. And then we have the content. The content is the subject matter of a work of art or design. It is revealed through the formal properties of the work and may be evident on a number of levels. There is immediate or obvious content of the work. It may be a historical scene, a landscape, a portrait, an interior, a functional object, or an abstraction. Beyond this, the content may become more complex. It is about what is happening in the works, what meaning you derive from them, and whether or not they create a particular mood or reaction. No? So, yun yung sinasabi natin dyan. The content are yun yung kung kanina, we have the form, itsura, no? Content is more on the effect to us. More on the effect doon sa audience, no? Ano yung mag-retain doon sa isipan, o ano yung nakikreate na mood, reaction doon sa audience. For example, nakakita kayo ng isang artist, no? You have his form or her form, 'di ba? Yung kanyang pananamit, kanyang kilos, galaw, kanyang mga kanta, the lyrics of the song, 'di ba? But now, we talk about content, 'di ba? Yung kanya bang lyrics ng kanta may epekto sa atin o kaya somewhat reaction, o our reaction doon sa kanyang ginawa, no? Doon sa popular culture. Sometimes content can be difficult to assess because it may be ambiguous or obscure. The formal elements of the work and its title can often help to read the content, as can recurring patterns, motifs, or symbols that may have a special significance. Yeah, so yun yung content, no? The content, again, the form is more on the outside or the external part, composition nung isang popular culture, no, nung isang character ng popular culture, 'di ba? Diba? The Vice Ganda, imagine Vice Ganda, the form, composition of Vice Ganda, and then we have content, yung mga sinasabi niya, yung laman niya, no, yung kanyang sense na tinatawag, and how we react on that is more on the content. And now we go with the context, no? A very important part of this is the context. The context helps us to understand the meaning of a work of art. The context is in which a work is made and displayed will impact on its formal resolution. So an artist will select particular materials and use them in particular way depending on their social, cultural, and personal background and the particular era they are working in. Context takes into account the social historical milieu within which the works were produced, and so on. So, sa madaling salita, the context is, we have the content and then the context. Kung titignan mo maigi, meron kang creator, meron kang, sa popular culture, meron kang character, no? And that character has its own form, has its content, but the context are the audience, no? Lagi sa popular culture, meron kang audience, lagi kang merong society na tumatanggap o receiver ng popular culture. So now, the artist or the popular culture character should adjust based on the context. Tandaan nyo, no? There are times that we laughed on English jokes, pero mas natatawa tayo sa Tagalog jokes, di ba? Sa mga punchline na Tagalog, mas natatawa tayo compared sa mga English na joke. Although natatawa rin tayo doon because we understand the context. There are times we understand the context, pero mas natatawa tayo sa mga Tagalog, di ba? Because of our context, kasi taga Pilipinas tayo, mas naiintindihan natin 'yon. 'di ba? So dun pumapasok yung context. So therefore, no, a certain popular culture become popular based on the context, 'di ba? Malaking bagay yung context doon sa popular culture. Bakit? Kasi pag hindi angkop yung popular culture doon sa context, no, is hindi naging effective, o sabihin natin hindi nagtatagal yung popular culture na yun. Okay? So, now, I have here pictures, no? A sample nung pinag-uusapan natin. We have, of course, the Blackpink ice cream. Ay, chillin', di ba? So, we have the form, di ba? The way, paano sila manamit, make-up, bihis, itsura, 'di ba? The composition, maliliit ang kanilang mga sikmura, 'di ba? Yeah. So that's the composition, that's the form. No, the content are the reaction that we feel, no, the mood that we feel when we see them. And the context is us, the audience, 'di ba? The context will be when did they release this song? Angkop ba yun? Tama ba yung time na yun? The audience, 'di ba? Would the audience like the song? 'Di ba? The dance moves, 'di ba? So context. Now we go with a more Filipino artist, no? This is Ben and Ben. We have the album cover, the song cover, digital cover ng Katang Isip, the Limasawa Street, and the Araw-Araw, 'di ba? Look at the form, 'di ba? The content, especially the song, when we hear the songs, 'di ba? Pasok sa isip natin the reaction, the feelings. Ayan. And of course, we have the context, 'di ba? The context will be the audience, still the audience, and angkop ba doon sa audience yung kanta, 'di ba? So kung angkop ito, yung context niya, pagiging angkop niya doon sa audience will help doon sa existence, o yung matagal ba na mag-exist, will it retain sa isip ng audience yung popular culture. Okay? And last is the Encoding and Decoding by Stuart Hall. No? Encoding and Decoding, focusing on the communication processes at stake in televisual discourse. The essay challenges some of the most cherished views of how media messages are produced, circulated, and consumed in order to propose a new theory of communication. Basically, where traditionally the meaning of the media message was viewed as static, transparent, and unchanging throughout the communication process. Hall argues that the message sent is seldom, if ever, the one received, and that communication is systematically distorted. Okay, sa madaling salita, medyo mahaba-haba pa ito, no? But there is a video na ipapanood ko sa inyo. You have to watch that in order for us to understand more doon sa encoding, decoding ni Stuart Hall, no? It is an approach in popular culture in the sense that the popular culture is using television or televisual in order to influence other people, in order to make other people understand or accept a certain popular culture. Sumikat sila, Vice Ganda, sumikat yung iba't ibang artista because of television, because of social media, no? And it is more on the visual. So we have the sender, the message, and the receiver, 'di ba? Nakabase ito sa CMR or yung communication model na yon, na we have the communicator as the sender, and his or her message is using different channel like television, social media, radio, in order to send its message to the receiver. But the idea here is that not all receivers are the same. no? Hindi lahat ng receiver ay agree agad doon sa sinisend ng isang sender or ng isang communicator. For example, a politician, merong sinasabi yung politician, no, na bagay, and sinabi niya yon through television or through social media, at maraming receiver, no, hindi to iisang receiver lang. So because there are so much receivers, itong receivers na to, hindi to lahat nag-agree, no? Tatlong bagay, we have the dominant, 'di ba? We have the yung nag-a-adapt, and the opposite, 'di ba? Yung nag-a-adapt is sila yung mga pwedeng sila yung marami, no, because they agree somewhat, pero there are some certain adjustments that has to do. So para mas maintindihan pa natin yung meaning ng encoding and decoding by Stuart Hall, so ipapanood ko sa inyo yung video. Ayan. Again, sa tingin ko is hindi nyo ito mapapakinggan. So, ibibigay ko na lang yung video doon sa link. Okay? So, still, I'm encouraging you to please still watch the video after. So, now, ano yung sample ng encoding and decoding? Encoding and decoding by Stuart Hall. So, there is this politician. No, we have the Sara Duterte, the daughter of our current president, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, and then there are people, 'di ba, communicating to run Sara Duterte for 2022, no, next year's election. So the communicator, sabihin itong mga taong to ang the communicator, and the message is to run Sara run, 'di ba? So ano yung mga way nila para i-broadcast ito? We have social media, 'di ba? Or sabihin kung meron mang television, sige. Those are channels. And then we have the receivers, us. Now there are some receivers. You still there, guys? Okay, so there are receivers that are dominant. They agree. Yeah, tama. Run, Sara, please run. But there are some audience, there are some receivers that might agree. Yes, okay naman. Okay namang tumakbo si Sara. Pero, dapat there are some conditions. And, there are receivers that are completely opposite. No, yung Sara run Sara, wala nang kwenta yan. Ganun yung concept nila. So, again, bagaman meron tayong tatlo na klase ng receiver, yung mga completely agreed, yung mga with adjustments, and the opposite, meron pa rin shared concept o shared idea na doon sila nag-rely, 'di ba? The dominant agrees because of the shared concept. The people with that requires adaptation or adjustments said or agreed na there should be adjustment because of the shared knowledge or shared or common idea. And then the opposite are opposing the message because of the same shared idea, no? So kung tignan mo, ganun lang yung concept dito. The approach of the encoding and decoding is that a certain popular culture is not always right. It's not always agreed by the dominant, or not always true or agrihan, kakainin, lulunukin ng audience, kundi merong audience na nag-iisip, merong audience na tumataliwas, 'di ba? And we have to weigh those concept, the shared knowledge, para mas maintindihan natin yung certain popular culture. Again, ba't natin kailangan intindihin yon? Because those popular culture can be for us, positive for us, or negative to us. Okay? And then another last image I can show you is of course the Manny Pacquiao statement on the against President Duterte's stand on the West Philippine Sea. Sabi niya nakapanghina kasi iba sa simula. Narinig natin bago mag-eleksyon sa kampanya nung sinabi niya na mag-jet ski siya dala ang bansang Pilipinas. Sa puso ko noon, sabi ko ito na iboboto ko. Tapos ito ang crucial na pangyayari ngayon. Again, this is the message of Manny Pacquiao, and it travels through different channel, social media, television, newspaper, and then reaching receivers. And there are different receivers. The receivers are differently sided. There are some opposing it, agreeing on it, and then there are some people who needs adjustment, who agrees but need adjustment. But the fact here is that why we are hearing Manny Pacquiao, why are we hearing Manny Pacquiao at these crucial times? Diba? It's because Manny Pacquiao has a plan to run for presidency in 2022. So, of course, isa yun sa concept na gustong makita or maipakita ni Manny Pacquiao, that he is active on things to create exposure, para maging familiar sa kanya yung audience. And again, there are different receivers, different concept. Okay? So, I guess yun na yung last natin. Yeah. I hope you learned something today. Thank you so much, BSP22, for joining me. Again, I'm asking you to please still watch the video after yung